Okay.
Okay. So I'm actually real excited about this, Tracy, doing this spot on chat. Let's just call it that, between you and I, and maybe we'll consider some guests in the future. But on a day-to-day basis, I get questions from franchisors and franchisees and also franchise brokers about how to help increase the performance of themselves or the performance of their franchisees. And there are so many markers within the SpotOn profile and within the SpotOn Eclipse that kind of gives a gap analysis, areas where we are strong and areas where we are weak. In fact, I tell my franchisors, I take the assessment every 6 months myself, in large part because it gives me insight feedback about where my strengths and weaknesses are. Sometimes if my business requires an intensity in one area, my muscles atrophy in another area, right?
Interesting.
And so I take it on a regular basis, and obviously franchisors are looking at themselves and brokers are looking at themselves and franchisees are looking at themselves. So I thought it'd be fun for us to chat about various markers within, especially the SpotOn Eclipse Report, and what a franchisor can do to help their franchisees in those areas, or if it's an assessment you've taken yourself, things that you can do to enhance your own performance or behavior or satisfaction.
Yeah.
And the one that comes up a lot that I thought you'd have great insight, as our master trainer and dealing with franchisors all the time, Tracy, is the area of conflict management. It's a marker that we're seeing overall in the last 7 or 8 years. It's a marker we're seeing dropping universally. It seems like as a society, we're not as good at managing conflict. We've become afraid to hurt someone's feelings and say something.
A little complacent. It sounds like as a society, the bar is dropping on what the level of conflict resolution and the level of communication needs to be.
I agree.
And quite often when we are talking about communication, we end up preaching to the choir, because those who are interested in communication are listening to the topics on communication. I think you have a great point about how these teams really, for purposes of cohesion, really need these conflict management tools and conflict resolution and these great communication skills.
Yeah. And so I wanted to tap into your expertise in this area. Zorakle measures these markers, but you're dealing on the back end. You're coaching individuals in these areas when they're scoring too low or too high for the role that they are playing. And I just wanted to tap into your knowledge base as a coach, as a trainer of the SpotOn tool. What advice you would give? I mean, this happens to be just coincidentally a marker I personally am weak in, conflict management. And I'm running a business and franchisees are running a business. And one of the things, of course, that we know is if we delay dealing with a brewing conflict, it only gets worse, with time.
That's interesting. There's so much I want to say about that sentence that you just mentioned. First and foremost, even earlier when you were mentioning that you personally take the SpotOn every 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if most people know your background. I mean, here you are, this brilliant woman who has studied behavioral science for 30 years, right? And in all that time, you've learned so much about human behavior. You've put together, not only version 1.0, but version 2.0 is what I call it, of, these amazing profiling tools. And I think getting back to whether or not somebody's good or not at conflict resolution, I think that, like anything else, conflict resolution, it's almost like a skill where we handle it different ways. Just like in the assessment, we have values that come up different for each person, right? We don't all walk around with the same values. Well, we also all don't walk around with the same conflict resolution style, right? Like some people run towards conflict. Some people run away from conflict. Some people treat conflict like it's a negotiation, which is great. And, you know, sitting people down and having that conversation. There's just so many moving parts to conflict, because you have the topic itself and then you have the people's personalities, which
what a great point.
Yeah, it adds a whole other dimension onto conflict.
Yeah, and then of course the conflict itself, it depends on the weightiness of that. So to your point, I have my own set of values as a business owner. I have my own personality, and then I have, from a competency perspective, which is what conflict management is. It's a skill, right?
Yeah.
So it means I can get better at it because it's a skill. It's not innate. It's not innate. It's a skill.
Right. That's why people become, you know, mediators, right? Quite often you even have attorneys who go back to school to become mediators because they understand, you know, both sides of a situation. And then they have these great communication skills, some of them, not all of them. Some of them only have that skill where they'll fight on that one side, that one behalf. But other attorneys have this skill where, okay, I see two sides of a situation, and I can also see the steps that I could use to bridge the conflict. And that's really what conflict management and conflict resolution is about. It's about being able to understand that we all have an opinion. We all can't be right 100% of the time. How do we bridge those steps to get to that middle ground where you've heard the phrase, like, we all have to be a little satisfied and a little dissatisfied in a negotiation. It's not like we're making everybody happy. It's everybody has to be a little happy and a little unhappy in order to know that they've really reached something that's really mutual, that everybody can live with.
Oh my gosh, I love that description. And I love the word mediate, because if we look at conflict like that, which is a means by which we both have a little pain, but we all both have a lot of pleasure if we come to a mutual understanding, which makes me wonder if that's a little bit of what conflict is me. I want it my way, and I'm unwilling to compromise or be flexible. Or I think it's more, because I see it societally, just a lack of understanding of one another. So it may not be that we're selfish and we're demanding it our way, but we flat out don't understand somebody else's needs or desires, or how this might be infringing on them in this particular situation.
Exactly. I know what I want. I don't know what you want, but I know what I want. But now it's up to me for a happy mediation, for a happy negotiation, for a happy conflict resolution. It's up to me to find out what you want. And oftentimes it's just a matter of simple communication.
Yeah, simple communication. So give us some advice. If I'm a franchisor, as an example, and I have this wonderful system I have created as a franchisor, I need my franchisees to embrace it. I need my franchisees to leverage it so they can build their own business. But every once in a while, a franchisor is going to have an issue with the franchisee that maybe is not embracing the system for whatever reason. They don't understand it. They think they have a better way, whatever it is. What would be a great way to deal with that kind of a situation between a franchisee and a franchisor?
That's where the SpotOn profile works wonders, because it tells you right there, right, what what their top 7 values are. So when you know, if I know what's important to you, I can work with you towards that, or I can speak to you in a way that addresses what's important to you. So the very beginning of conflict resolution between franchisor, franchisee, and even between franchisee and staff is taking the assessment, taking the SpotOn profile, because right there are the top 7 professional values, those top 7 values that are important to this individual. And aligning, they may not have, right, the franchisor and the franchisee, or the franchisee and you know, the person who's working in the business, they may not have the same values. So finding out about their values, finding out about what their values mean to them, because even among values, trust may mean something completely different to me than it means to you. Maybe trust to me means I can trust you with a secret, and trust to somebody else means, hey, you've got my back if I do A, B, and C, and you realize that I should have done E, F, and G.
Good point.
Right? So good point. The values mean different things, and it's not just trust.
Good point. And like you said, we each have our own set of values, which is why Zorakle is preaching constantly about the importance of values alignment between the franchisee and the franchisor, and of course, the franchisee and his or her employees, because the more aligned we are with the values, the more agreeable we're going to be, the more harmonious we're going to be. And it creates this consensus of how we make decisions, and it also determines our ultimate behavior. And if our values are similar, we're likely going to similarly look at situations. So there's probably going to be less conflict just from that.
You'll share viewpoints. Think about it like this. When an individual takes the Zorakle SpotOn profile, the report will tell them exactly where their own values are out of alignment, let alone where their values are out of alignment with another individual outside of themselves. So quite often it's also about aligning our own values, like understanding what our values mean to us, where our own values are out of alignment, and now how can we communicate and step into the vision of the business as the franchisor has originally created it to be. Because really, you know, a franchise is an executed vision, right? As is any, right? Somebody has a vision in their mind of how they want to create a business, you know, why it's important, who the target market would be, what the systems are, what the process is, what type of people, employees or franchisees come into the system. So understanding what that whole vision is, and it's important that a franchisor understands what that whole vision is as well.
And is good at communicating it to the franchisees, because you're right. If we somehow transfer that vision as a franchisor to the franchisee, that franchisee now knows where I'm going, right? But if I'm a poor communicator of delivering what that vision is, and how's a franchisee going to be able to follow it, right? So it's not just an alignment of values, but very clear communication of where we're going. So having, as a franchisor, some strong leadership and communication skills that has that franchisee capture that vision, right? Capture that vision and embrace it. So it's a combination of a shared values, as you pointed out, and the franchisor or the franchisee with his employees needs to be effective at communicating where we're going and why we're doing this, and build consensus towards that vision, let's call it, that we're all heading towards.
I think you raise a really great point, because think about it like this. A franchise concept works so diligently on creating its brand
Mm-hmm.
and hiring people that align with the brand. But then how do you communicate that brand? So now we're stepping into something a little bit different as well. And we can cover that in a whole other,
Yeah.
a whole other Zorakle chat, SpotOn chat, and that would be culture.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about being able to communicate well, deliver the brand, how you want the internal people to act, to respond, to grow, what you want leadership to look like. So it's not only building your external brand to face the public, it's communicating your brand internally, your vision, and creating your culture.
Right. Which then goes back to the values alignment, because that becomes a large portion of what culture is. And of course, understanding your culture and screening for and recruiting for folks that fit within that culture, because you're going to have conflict with people that are incongruent, inconsistent, not in alignment with your culture, with your values. It's just the way it's
Yeah.
going to be.
Yeah.
And conflict is just part of human nature. If we look at it from a bigger spiritual perspective,
Mhm.
it's a way for each of us to grow and discover parts of ourselves and learn more and have greater intimacy and understanding for one another. When we bump heads, it's an opportunity to discover what's important to another person and to uh, understand that individual maybe at a deeper level. If there's always kumbaya, we're always in agreement, right?
Right.
Then neither one of us really grow that muscle of communication and casting a vision and building consensus and dealing with obstacles in life. Obstacles in life and conflict are normal. And trust me, I'm a kumbaya person. I don't like conflict. I'd rather it just be humming along and we never disagree on anything. And I'm sure franchisees are thinking the same thing and franchisors are thinking the same thing. But it's part of life. It's a part of a self-discovery process and learning more about that individual.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it would be nice if everything was always, kumbaya, but we sometimes we have to take off our rosy colored eyeglasses, because everything isn't always perfect. And to your point, conflict is both positive and negative, right? The negative is that there's a clash, there's tension, there are
Mm-hmm.
all of these uncomfortable feelings that arise. And to the positive, it's an opportunity to work things out. I mean, you see it even with kids, children, they get together and they fight. And then the next thing you know, they become best friends because they had this fight. It's like, two people want to be like the biggest, toughest kid in the school, and they fight. And then they realize, like, wow, I have a lot of respect for this person. And they end up being buddies. So it's the same thing. It gives
Yeah.
us an insight into what the other person really needs, wants, and demands for themselves. And then understanding that, the communication and the dialogue can then begin.
Yeah. I love how you reframed that. Because as kids, we were definitely much better at it than we are as adults. And to reframe it in such a way that it's a moment in time where we disagree. Let's figure it out, because the friendship is more important. In fact, let's build a stronger friendship now that I understand you a bit better and what you need. I'm so sorry I stepped on that toe, and
Yeah.
vice versa, you stepped on my toe. And if we as franchisors and business owners and even brokers who are building businesses look at it as an opportunity to build a stronger friendship,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Rather than he's a goober and he never understands me or whatever it is, right?
Right. No, exactly.
It's so fascinating. Um, if we look at it that way. So I guess one of the questions I oftentimes ask myself, and I'm guessing others are asking, is there are a million signs usually along the way of where we're going to be out of alignment. You know, this assessment, of course, tells us, but in the day-to-day working with an employee or interacting with a franchisee or dealing with a client or a vendor, there's tension points along the way. And I personally tend to see no evil, hear no evil. I'm
Mhm.
kumbaya, right? What would cause someone like me just to ignore it when if I went in and solved that or clarified that issue, it would never become a conflict? Why would someone not pay attention? Is it just ignorance? Is it, you know, fear of hurting someone's feelings? What would have us stop and not deal with what's in front of us before it becomes, you know, the mountain and molehill kind of analogy, right?
You know, and I have to preface this with the fact that there is a difference between coaching and therapy, right? There's a difference
Yes.
between those two, which I can only say that there are a lot of different reasons that would stop somebody um, from
Just
really
dealing with
taking a
it.
good look at what's happening. So number one, it can be a matter of prioritization. Maybe
Hmm.
the roof is on fire, so it doesn't matter that you know, Zelda and Dave are butting heads on this smaller, you know, and it could be not only a prioritization of the problem, but maybe, like you mentioned at the very beginning when we started talking, a prioritization of the magnitude of the problem. Maybe it's like,
Hmm.
oh, it'll resolve itself. It'll fix itself. That's, you know, that's like everything else. It'll just take care of itself. It'll go away. Well, some things don't go away. Some things fester and become enormous. And how do we know which of those conflicts will go away and which will become enormous? So it
Good
really
point.
goes back to our values, what we're valuing for ourselves, what we're valuing for our company, um, good leadership, good management, leadership, executive leadership training. A lot of problems in a company, I'm sorry to say, stem from the top down.
Hmm.
Problems aren't just problems on an ongoing basis. If it's something on an ongoing basis, it's something that hasn't been addressed. And if it hasn't been addressed, then it's either an I don't want to address it or I don't know how
How?
to address it.
Hmm.
So it's either a want or a how.
I
Right?
like that. And as you're talking, you know, in the stages of growth in our assessment, we talk about when a franchisor is moving from stage 1 and stage 2, they are juggling 1,000 priorities. And sometimes this little niggly thing over here, I, I just don't have time to deal with it. It's not a priority. I got to bring in revenue. I got to close that deal. Whatever it is that the franchisor is dealing with or the franchisee is dealing with. And that stage 1 franchisor, it's a crisis of leadership. That's what Dr. Neil Churchill calls it. It's a crisis of leadership where the leadership is so busy, like you said, dealing with the roof being on fire, they don't have time to deal with this little thing where two
Yeah.
employees seem to be not getting along or the franchisees going a little bit sideways. It really is a priority thing. And then as they grow and things align a little bit better, now they can deal with a non-compliant franchisee or an employee that just always seems to be disagreeable or a bad apple or causing conflict, or not, you know, living fully up to their performance.
Mhm.
Now we can deal with it because the priorities have allowed us to do that. We've put our ducks in a row. We call that a stage 2 franchisee. So I think you're right. I think some of it is just priority. And I think, like you said, it's a values thing, and it's also a skills thing. I've not been taught how to recognize when something is brewing,
Mhm.
right? And so I ignore it, like you mentioned.
Mm.
Or I just don't have those mediation, negotiation skills or attitude. But Dr. Daniel Goleman calls these emotional and social intelligence markers, conflict management being one of those. He calls them skills. And I think he calls them skills for a reason. It's because we can build that muscle. We can get better at conflict management, recognizing, bringing it to the surface, dealing with it quickly, and doing so in a way where we can restore sanity to ourselves
Yeah.
and help that other person and move on down the track to building our businesses.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's never too late to learn conflict resolution. It's not a skill like riding a bicycle where if you don't learn by a certain age that it's more difficult. I mean, it's never too late to learn conflict resolution. And going back to the priorities, I think there's a saying that it's not a priority until it's a priority. You know, if you were, think about it, if you were moving into a new home, you would want to make sure the tile was down and the walls were painted before you move the furniture in. So you're not going to walk in and say, oh my goodness, I have no furniture. You're going to walk in and you're going to say, oh my goodness, I have no tiles
Walls.
on the floor and no paint on the walls. So you're going to get that taken care of first. And to your point, you happen to be a total expert in the stages of growth. And every time I listen to one of the stages of growth uh, webinars, I learn another tidbit. But just understanding and I do recommend that everybody listen to that, because that is one of the ways that you can learn what to expect as your company grows, and then prepare for those obstacles that are going to come up, for those conflicts that are going to come up.
Right. And the analogy was a beautiful one with the house, the priorities. When a franchisor is in stage 1 and stage 2, the priorities are putting in the walls, putting in the systems, putting in the processes, developing the product and service the way they need. Those are indeed the priorities. And if we get our focus off of that and forget to put up the wall and forget to put in the foundation, and we get caught up in the minutia of this little petty conflict over here, it's just not good use of time
Yeah.
and resources at that point. But it doesn't take away the importance of making sure to avoid some of those conflicts. We are selecting the right franchisees, or in the case of the business owner, the franchisee, we're selecting the right employees to start with. So the amount of conflict is dramatically reduced simply
Absolutely.
because they align with who they are.
Absolutely. And once again, I can't overemphasize enough the point that that's why taking the spot on profile is so critical. Because when you know your values and your strengths, then you know who you need to have on your team in order to take your business to that next level. So critical.
So critical. Absolutely. So I'd like folks that are sort of dropping in on our conversation to walk away with a tangible 1 or 2 recommendations that you have. They're having a conflict with a franchisee, or they're having a conflict with an employee. Do you, as a coach, as a trainer, dealing with this day to day with business owner after business
Oh, yeah.
owner, do you have 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you would give someone like myself who might be conflict avoidant? I'm the runaway person that you were talking away versus running towards. But do you have 2 or 3 pieces of advice for someone?
Definitely. First and foremost, it's if you haven't taken the spot on profile in a while, take it now when you're sensing this looming conflict. That's number one. Number two is recognize where your company is at and where you want it to go, and try to look at the steps that you'll need to get there. Not just steps in the processes, but I mean the people, what type of support you're looking for, what type of support you'll need, and how you'll relay the vision to any, franchise or any franchisee or any employees. But also understanding what's important to the people around you in the form of their values and their skill sets, because they may need some coaching or some prompting in a certain area that you may not realize. So somebody may be dragging their feet on running towards fixing a problem when in reality, they might be just scared because they don't have the skill set, or just the fact that they don't have the skill set may be stopping them. But there's one more thing that I'd like to talk about in a scenario like this, where there is an upcoming conflict, and it's something called scripting. And scripting is super important because once you work to realize what the problem is, words are everything. Words mean so much. And choosing the proper words to relay a message or to prompt someone to sit down at the table to work through a problem, and the words you choose while you're working out the problem are tremendous. Tremendous.
Yeah.
Scripting can mean the difference of conflict resolution and someone walking out. Wow. Scripting can be the difference between getting the promotion and not getting the promotion. There's so much included, and yes, it involves words and linguistics and writing and the skills to put all of that together. And I don't want to take us off, out in left field too far, but scripting is really important on choosing the right words for the right situation. And you may have to have different scripts, whether you're speaking up, whether you're speaking mid-level, whether to superiors or people who are reporting to you. There are different ways to communicate with different people. Scripting is super important. Understanding all of their values and the visions that are coming down from the top, and the subtle points of conflict or the dissatisfaction that might be arising from the bottom up, so that everybody can kind of meet in the middle and come to terms with what's going on in this whole company growth. And when done the right way, it's a beautiful thing.
Oh my gosh, this is like a light bulb went off in my head, Tracy. This is just incredible. The idea of scripting, the idea of a recipe, and maybe we can do this recipe for each of those roles that you're talking about, because you're right. If someone is having a conflict with a senior executive versus a subordinate, or an elder versus someone younger that doesn't have the experience yet, or the knowledge yet, or the time invested in someone, it's a different script. It's a different conversation. Or if it's peer-to-peer where the conflict is, that negotiation, that mediation, that script as you described it is different. It's different with my grandchild than it is with my son, than it is with an employee, than it is with my boss, or someone in a different. That's absolutely I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, some of the most famous coaches will tell you that they have interviewed thousands of people, or hundreds even. And, you can sit here from today until tomorrow guessing the one quality that they all have in common. But the truth of the matter is, there is only one commonality, and it's use of the English language. They know how to use words the right way to get what they want. And these are the most successful people in the world.
Yeah. And we're in a society talking about this conflict management number dropping over the last few years that we've been observing at Zorakle, which is why you and I decided to do some of these conversations. It's a dangerous trend.
Mm-hmm.
Some of this communication skills are dropping, our emotional and social intelligence is dropping, even IQ is dropping. And so if we don't address this as franchisors and professionals, there's going to be a whole lot more, you know, I'm on this side, you're on this side, conflict going on.
Polarization.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. So as society is getting more technology based, we're
Mm-hmm.
getting less proficient in our ability to see, what does that tone of voice
Yeah.
mean? Why did she use that word 3 times? Or what's that gesture mean? We're not picking up on those subtle cues to even know where maybe we stepped on a toe, or we're creating
Right.
conflict,
Well,
not purposefully, but because we have.
yeah, emails, social media, texting, that's a whole other issue. I mean, that's the reason why emojis were created also, because you really don't know the tone of voice. And I'm guilty of this myself, where I've read an email and, thought like, wow, why is this person saying
Fact.
this? And they meant something entirely different. You can take something as sarcastic and funny, or you can take something as, oh my goodness, she or he just said this to me. There's so
Yeah.
much in how we interpret, so much.
Which also comes back to our own values, our own state of mind, meaning our
Right.
own emotional intelligence. If I'm already sensitive about something or having a bad day as a business owner,
Yes.
then that same email will hit my ears or my eyes, and it's going to land a particular way. And on
Yes.
a different day, when I'm having a hilarious, fun, playful, successful day, it's going to hit me differently. Again, where this assessment is so powerful is we look at those emotional and social intelligence markers. If I am lacking emotional intelligence that day, I'm angry because the
Yes.
cup of coffee was too hot, or my husband did this, or my employee did that, then what my interaction with that vendor, with that employee, with that client is likely going, unless I have very great emotional intelligence, is going to create misunderstanding at
Right.
minimum and conflict in the worst case scenario. So possessing just conflict management skills is not enough. We also have to possess emotional and social intelligence so we
Right.
can handle. This has been such a great conversation about this topic. I'm wondering if I can ask if we could chunk it down in our next couple of conversations and talk more specifically about these scripts, maybe the kind of script that would happen a peer-to-peer, self to superior, self to someone else. Would you be comfortable having those conversations in a more myopic way in another conversation?
Yeah. Yeah. We'll definitely explore a couple of them.
Good.
Sure. Yeah. It's such an interesting perspective.
It is.
Such an
It
interesting
really is.
one. Yeah.
Excellent. Tracy, I really appreciate your well thought out answers and the gentle approach you always take in every conversation we have. Always leave with ahas, with your uh, coaching abilities and your thought processes. And I love how, here we are measuring it at Zorakle, and then when you look at it, you instantly know, here's what we need to do with that client, and here's where we're going to have the greatest impact if we work on that particular strength, or work on that particular, in this case, weakness, a skill in conflict management that maybe somebody lacks. So thank you so much.
Rebecca, Oh, you're so welcome, first of all. And second of all, I think that we have a mutual admiration because I love your scientific brain and how you were able to combine 6, 7 sciences, high sciences, not just, not just a blurb that we read on the
Yeah.
internet somewhere, but these high sciences and combining them into this unbelievable algorithm that really gives people insight. I mean, and the name is exactly what the profile is. It's spot on. So hats off to you for creating it and for recognizing this tremendous need, in the franchise world.
Yeah, yeah, especially our franchisors that are in stage 2 and 3 and further, where they're really focused on unit level economics and creating harmony. um, they're asking again and again, what can we do when someone scores in some of these areas? What can we do as franchisors to help our franchisees? And then, of course, the tool is now available for franchisees using it with employees. Same way, what can I do if an employee is not lacks some of these emotional and social intelligence skills and other areas where maybe they're not in alignment, but I'm choosing to hold on to that franchisee. I'm choosing to hold on to that employee. What can I do to be more harmonious and have us be mutually productive and satisfied in that relationship? So I think this, it'll be interesting to see. This is our first spot on chat.
And yeah, I look forward to future ones with you.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be
Yeah,
fun.
thank you.
All right. So for those of you dropping in on this conversation, if you have topics you want to discuss, where you're having challenges with franchisees, or there's markers in the SpotOn profile or the SpotOn Eclipse that you would like more information, uh, this is, drop us a line, and we will address those topics in the future with Tracy and myself. And if it's an area that we don't have an expertise in, we're going to go hunt somebody down that can indeed help us in those areas. We want you to run profitable businesses, and we want to provide the highest science, as you described it, and technologies to help you in that process. So thanks again, Tracy. We will see you on the next
Thank you.
SpotOn chat.
See you then. Bye.
Bye.